So this is going to be the video that goes over my Android development environment, and basically I set up this environment and also built a very basic application which was more geared towards just learning how Android Studio works and how to build an application in Android Studio, since this is my first time using this. I did use a lot of different resources to understand how everything works, and I have those open right here. So I used developer.android.com, and this website was very helpful. It actually goes step by step through how to download Android Studio. Then it walks you through every screen of Android Studio and how to set up a new project, how to choose the project, and how to configure the project, how to name the application, all the way down to explaining that once the project is created, how the important files are set up. So the main activity file basically contains the logic, and the XML file is the user interface. In addition to this, I also went through different tutorials that explained Android development using Android Studio, and also walked through some tutorials where they teach you how to build an Android application using Android Studio. So after going through different videos on YouTube and just reading different articles, I was able to have a good idea of how to use Android Studio. So what we are seeing on the screen right now, on the right side is Android Studio, and it's on the user interface side right now, and this is my code. This is the end result, and this is the emulator on the left, but I'm going to actually walk through this in the way that I created the project. So initially, when I created a new project file, this screen did not look like this. It actually just shows a hello world in the middle where this show name is at this moment. And what I actually did is I deleted that, and I used this palette to go down to buttons and add this button right over here. What I started out with is taking this button, going to the attributes side, and modified the ID to just simply say button. And I modified the text to say show name. I also added constraints to the layout. That way, when a user opens this application, this button will always be in the same spot on the screen. So from the top over here, I wanted it to be 288 units from the top of the screen, and then I added a left and right constraint right here so that this button is centered. I also added a text view, which is right down here, and the way I did that is again using the palette, going to text view, dragging that over here. And for this, the reason why there's no text inside is I left the ID as is, but I did delete this text. So kind of switching thoughts real quick, the goal that I had in mind for this application is that I wanted the user to be able to enter their name kind of right here, click show name, and then it would display on the bottom. And for this reason, I have left this blank. So once I added these two, the button and the text view on the user interface side, I actually had not entered this first. I like to go through the process in pieces. That way I can make sure everything is working properly when I start writing the logic. And I jumped over to this side actually and started creating the object types. I started with creating the my button and creating show text. And then I wanted to set the my button equal, linking this to the ID that I showed on the the user interface side. So this ID is button and this ID is text view. So the next step naturally became to link the object type. So linking both of these object types over here to their ID, and that piece is actually over here and also right over here. So this portion, this is the object type and it's being linked to the ID, which was button for the first one and text view for the next one. This portion over here, originally I didn't have it set up this way, so what I wanted to pass in the parentheses, originally I just wrote hello user and simply just had it set to show this text as soon as this emulator would launch, just to ensure that I linked the objects and the IDs properly and everything was functioning, which it was. The next step then became to actually make this button over here something a user can click or tap on, and the way that I did that was right here by using a event listener. And basically this event listener over here, right over here, the purpose of this would be to allow this button right here to listen for user tabs, and then anything that is inside of this function, this entire function right over here. So anything that is inside of this function will end up displaying on the bottom over here, which is that hidden text view that we can't see right now. So after that, as I mentioned before, the intent was for the user to be able to actually enter their name and that text to show down over here. So I ended up going back to this side. I added a plain text using the palette. So text, plain text, added that right over here, added the constraints. Again, I also added a constraint so that it's linked to the show name button. And that way it's 152 units from the top and spaced out from the show button, evenly spaced out from the left and the right, and shows in the middle. And I left the ID as is, and it says edit text. The name I changed to enter name, so that's intuitive for the user to know what to do. Similarly, the way I had created the object types and then linked it to the ID, I did the same thing. I went ahead and created those object types over here and then linked this to its ID, which was edit text, which is this portion. So now what I wanted was the text that the user will type to be displayed after the user clicks the show name button, and that is how this portion of the code actually ended up being modified. So what I actually did is that text would be the string. I wrote this logic in here and then I modified this to basically show this string name right in here. So now all of this is actually inside this function. Basically, what this means is that anytime a user will click this button, whatever's inside this function will show, and the function is set to show the text hello, comma, and whatever the user ends up typing on the top portion right over here. So let's test this. The way to do that would be to go onto the emulator right here. So as I'm coding, I did realize that if I just click this right over here, it applies the changes right away, so I don't have to run it every single time, but initially I would run the app by just kind of clicking this portion here. So I didn't make any changes, but just to be on the safe side, I want to make sure everything is good and up to date. So I'm just making sure, waiting for it to load. I will actually just close this and run it over again. I'm just going to move this over to the left side so it's not on top of the code. And now we're back to what we were seeing before. So basically, if I click over here, now I can use either this keyboard or my physical keyboard on my computer, but I'll just use this one on here. I can enter my name, which is Fiza Zaman. And now when I click the show name button, it should say hello, comma, my name, and an exclamation point. Not actually sure why it is popping up like this, so that is something I will have to fix because it was working a little bit ago. Let me just restart everything. Okay, and let's try it again. No, that is still doing the same thing, so not not sure why. I will have to fix this and make another subsequent video after this is fixed.